like the way Augers looks. I always found that really impressive.
Augers, yeah, and also like when they showed it off as a part of just the premiere and the promotion of it with the drums, boom, boom. Yeah, it's
Dancer confirmed.
Dancer. Wait a minute,
remember that?
Yeah, dude,
like, that was such a cool way to reveal Dancer.
I know.
Wait, what?
Well, we hadn't seen them up to that point actually reveal the job as a trailer, and so we were like, are they going to reveal the job in the trailer? And then they've kind of started doing that, you know, obviously because that was only on part 1. We never saw them cut to Samurai as well, and so it's like, okay, cool. And then eventually they released the part 2, which was really exciting to see. Let's see. All right, okay, perfect. Let me open this.
Yeah, people assume the Mail of the Era thing was like the first time they've pulled a fast one on us, but it's not.
It's like a Julie's calling me.
We continually speculate, get it wrong, and then hold them accountable. All right.
All right, 1 second. Julie needs my help. I'll be 1 minute.
Okay. I think I'm going to run a quick ad break so that you guys don't get mid-rolls. So I'm going to go get some coffee. Let's take 3 minutes. Because he says 1 second. There's no way it's 1 second. There's no way. Okay. See you guys in 3. I need coffee.
Boom, baby. There we go. This will be the last live show for at least 10 days. So just heads up, everybody. Because Chris is going to celebrate 10 years. How long have we waited? All right, so we have that. Pull that up, zoom it in a little bit. Perfect. Perfect. Boom. All right. Oh, good. Thanks, Gray. And Chris has disappeared right at the same time that I did.
All right. Mother of God.
Welcome back. Daniel's like, chat's letting me know what happened to you. So I ran back up and I was like, and there's not even, Chris isn't even here.
Get your life together,
morning, guys. Sora Kingdom here. I love your profile picture. Oh, that is so funny. I like that. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning.
I'm gonna have
Chris too.
I'm gonna go ahead and kick some ads off so we can get out in front of that.
Genius. Real men of genius.
Now my dog wants out because the act of me getting coffee. My wife has been taking him to Starbucks and he gets a pup cup like every 10th time. But that means that now he salivates and every time he smells coffee because he thinks he's getting whipped cream. So he woke up from like a deep sleep to me pouring coffee in my mug. Is there whipped cream in this one?
Whipped cream? For me? For me, whipped cream? Oh, that's so funny. Good morning, everybody. So as I have y'all's attention, or if you're watching this as part of a VOD, so Chris is going to be celebrating 10 years of marriage to his wife, and so he'll be out, I think, starting this Friday. So we will not have a live show on Friday. We will clip this up. I might pace out like the topics if they're not like super urgent and pressing, just so that we have some content to roll out for you guys over the next week. Also, you can subscribe to the MP3 audio of this. Links in the description. We're trying to continue to grow that. So thanks so much for being here. Wes, what's up, dude? Wes checking on me, making sure I wasn't in that crazy accident in DFW yesterday. one of the perks of working from home is it's so funny too, because I was talking to Brandon about this. I was like, I used to commute like an hour, like it was always like an hour one way to work and back, and so that was fine. But it was like that was hard. But now, like that I work from home, somebody's like, "Hey, you want to go do this thing?" I'm like, oh, "How far away is it?" And they're like, 10 minutes. I'm like, "Oh man, 10 minutes." It's like 15 minutes. Oh, let me look. Do I want to sit in the car that long? It's so funny. It just cracks me up because it's like before, like I used to be a road warrior, you know. So the Boris 100% can relate. All right, so let me actually get the topics loaded up because I don't need these other ones from last week. I keep crossovers.
I don't know what all we're talking about because we've had a lot of chat conversations in the last 24 hours.
Yes, we have. So we've got the balance staff toxic.
This could end up being a long show.
Right. I do have a hard out at 10:30, so we can no more than 2 hours.
That's fine.
I want to talk to you about WoW 11.0. I know, exactly. Or Monday, yeah. So basically we have I have 4 topics technically queued up. We can talk about our crossovers, what we want to see, which would be fun. And so that might be our bonus topic, unless another bonus topic comes up. Discord talking about the frustration that they've experienced with balance the staff, which is a great resource for really kind of learning the game, which would be wonderful if it translated into the game itself. We're going to talk about the post, obviously 14 is for casuals. That's kind of the lead thumbnail that I put out for the show itself. So just as a heads up. And then Bellular's world revamp with 11.0, kind of topic. Because it's so interesting because obviously as we look to, as an aging MMO goes with 14 celebrating like 10 years of ARR next year, I don't think we'll see 7.0 until like at least, see, if you think about 6.3 in January, 6.4 in May, something like that, June, May, 6.5 the end of next year. So we're looking at 2024 spring, probably for 7.0 at the earliest. So, it's like in that regards, like that's going to be stepping in toe to toe with WoW as a 20-year anniversary. So there are lots of things I think to explore there. Thanks, guys, for the 8 likes on the live show. It helps the discovery of these so much, though. And if you guys are watching over on Twitch, we'd love it if you were able to lurk on both. Here is the said link. That way I can highlight y'all's comments, on page. So
welcome in, me. And for everybody that doesn't know, I finished 3.3 for my first time yesterday. I'll be doing 3.4 for my first time today as soon as we're done. So I'm excited.
Yeah. And I think Leonhard here has it right. Like I think we're looking at a lot of busyness with 16. We're going to look at a lot of busyness with 7 Remake Part 2.
Cool.
And who knows what else? We'll have to see if they decide to go with it. All right.
Let's kick it together.
I've got it all loaded up. Do we have an order of operations for topics that we want to cover?
The order you showed them was great.
So talking about the balance staff, casuals, and then WoW 11.0.
I would do the casuals last.
All right.
Can I slide WoW in the middle of those?
Oh, perfect. I can actually order these. This is great. I did not know I could do that. So the more you know. Let me make sure that we're recording.
And on the spice.
And on the spice. Okay, cool. And then let me actually get the right page pulled up then. And let's see how this looks for that. Perfect. Okay, cool. All right. We'll start on the spice. We'll end on the spice. And we'll explore it. Are you good to read the post itself?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Let me get this thing queued up. And guys, as well, just always weigh in on the live show. It's a great way. We've actually had a couple bonus topics just form based off of y'all's comments and discussion that's going on. So we're gonna have. I think I'm looking forward to this. It's going to be a good time. So all right, I'm gonna give myself just a quiet moment so I can see it easily in the edit. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Crystal Core Radio Podcast. Brian and Chris here, talking today about all things going on in the world of Final Fantasy XIV, World of Warcraft, MMORPGs overall. There's a lot that we want to explore for you guys today. Today's main topics, the breakdown and focus, is going to be a little bit of Reddit here, focusing on the balance staff. There was a post talking about why they're elitist and toxic. We're also going to be focusing in on the Final Fantasy XIV casual post. Is this game for casuals? Some exploration and topics there that Chris and I have been sitting down like at night, just kind of texting back and forth, just various different thoughts. And then also Bellular put out a World of Warcraft 11.0 post talking about the world revamp, and we want to explore that. We might also, as a part of the live show, have some bonus topics that pop up from time to time based off of live chat. But if you're here with us live, sound off in the comments. We'd love to see you. And also, if you're listening to the MP3 audio version of this, which rolls out on all podcasting platforms, you can go and give us a rating. We'd love to see those ratings. It helps with discovery of the show as well. So thank you guys for any and all feedback one way or the other. We appreciate y'all being here. Chris, our main lead topic here is the balanced Discord. But before we dive into that, you just stepped into patch 3.4 on your journey through Heaven's Word. Is there anything that's coming up? Are you going to be missing for a little bit? Like, are we going to have a live show next week? What's going on with you?
Yeah, we're moving these to Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And so like anybody in their first week at a job or anything, you've tried to be consistent. Step one is screw it up week one. So I am going to be taking this Friday off to try to get the house all clean and stuff. And we're actually going to be taking my dog to stay with a friend so that my wife and I next week from Saturday to the following Sunday, it's just going to be us, which means if we want to like go see a movie and after we're hungry, we don't have to come back. So her coworkers offered to watch our dog for us for a whole week, which I think will be weird. I think we'll miss him, but it's just going to be us celebrating kind of 10 years. And we got some comedy show tickets in there, and we plan on going for a hike. And so it should be a pretty good week. And the goal is to be as unplugged as possible. I asked her, I said, are you going to do any work during that week? And I just want to know whether or not I'm getting any like editing done on my laptop, because I agreed I'm going to shut this computer down. And she's like, no work. And then last night she goes, like if you had your laptop and you needed to get something done, I'm like, no, you said no work. So I'm going to be digging through my Eorzean encyclopedia, and that's it. That's the closest to no editing, no nothing. So should be a good week off.
Awesome. Yeah, it's really important to kind of disconnect. We like to try and obviously do that from time to time. I'd like to try and do it a little bit more often, especially with the kids. But yeah, you will miss your dog just like it with anything else. It's like, oh, that would have been a funny moment, or what have you. Or if he got his pup cup from when you go and get that coffee, you're gonna be like, oh man. So on that note, I think we're going to transition right now into our first main topic, guys. If you're watching this as a part of an archive, VOD, clip, highlight, short, all of that wonderful stuff, if you guys hit that, smash that like button, that's a great way of helping these out in the algorithm. Comment and share, or join us over on Discord, where we've been doing many different community nights. We've got a lot of people within the community kind of stepping up, helping out with multiple different kind of games too. So it's been a real joy to see the Discord grow as strong as it is. And speaking of Discords, there's another Discord out there called The Balance, which specializes in really trying to break down and educate people on their jobs themselves. But over on Reddit, obviously that's a place where dumpster fires and frustrations get vented, or people who feel like they want to express an opinion get dunked on. Really, at the end of the day, social media is a dangerous place depending on your view of the world. Chris, why don't you break down what we're talking about in the post here, and then we're going to kind of talk about why we're seeing this, why we think we're seeing this, and what we can assume could be done next.
Every game has resources like these, and every game it brings together people who are at a very high level and people who are just getting started on their journey and want answers from somebody at a high level. And that disparity is where 100% of the friction comes from. So let's dive in on that note. The Balance provides many resources which much of the player base relies on. These include beginner and advanced job guides, as well as compiling encounter resources, mostly made by other people within the community. I lurk the encounter general as well as several job lounge chats and sometimes contribute if I know the answer to someone's question. I often ask questions too if I don't see my answer within the pins of the channels, usually early on after an encounter's released. Most optimization related stuff. I can't help but notice, but a few select terminally online mentors in that Discord are often very aggressive and toxic in how they answer innocent questions. I understand that many people who play the game are rating every single day and night when content releases, and repetitive answers can get frustrating. But most people do not lurk in these Discord channels all day. The majority of users seeking information in the balance are semi-hardcore, casual, and they are often met with rude, elitist responses to their question.
I'm so glad you knew what SHC meant, because I'm like, I had no idea. Semi-hardcore casual.
Guess.
That's a great guess, because I was like, I've never seen that expression.
Me.
Yeah, we'll let chat let us know if there's another definition of that. Anyway, go ahead.
A common example I can think of is some people have a general question. Hi, I'm not sure why I'm dying to X, and they are asked to link a log. Then these mentors tend to crap all over those people included in that log for unrelated issues regarding optimal gameplay. Your scholar needs to learn how to heal. Unrelated, but your Reaper isn't pressing buttons. Stuff like that goes unchecked quite often. Anyway, not sure the exact purpose of this post. I just wanted to point out that one of the most helpful communities of this game has an unchecked elitist toxic aspect to it.
So I'd highlight the kind of the last point. That is like, I don't think it's unchecked. I think that's just how these things function. The question is that should we accept that? Should we allow that? Should we, how do you like stem that? But at the end of the, like, they brought up a couple of things that I thought was really kind of interesting. We know that especially within the balance, we've remarked on this before, and it's not just the balance, but there is a weird divide. It's almost maybe in a way a generational divide between those who prefer a video format of a guide and some of those who prefer a written format of a guide. And the strength that the written still has over video is that if something changes, they can just go and update the section of the change. So the guide generally in written form will have the most accurate information, but the written form doesn't have the algorithmic power and demand that a video has. And so a video form can end up having outdated information, could be relatively quickly. And so we've seen that there's been frustration voiced against like YouTubers and content creators in terms of like even the balance, but this doesn't, I'm not signaling them out because I see this happen in multiple kinds of games, this kind of mentality. And the other thing that's also interesting that I think Happy remarked on, which is like very true, is that if you want to be a content creator, you have to get, and this also applies to guide writers and even the Balance Discord, you have to get comfortable with the idea that you're going to be asked the same question multiple times repeatedly, especially on a live stream. And if you can't handle that, like, then you will not like this as a job. You will not like this as that concept, because people will come in, they have a question, and they might not have been there lurking all day. They might not have been listening to the whole live stream. They might not go and rewind and listen to a 3-hour or what have you.
You're also not going to enjoy working in a call center. You're also not going to enjoy teaching the same subject to students every year after year. You're also not going to, so like as a skill set, this is not the only place that's going to drive friction. So just be aware that if that's a personality trait that you have, that is either A, something that you should strive to work on if you want to have more flexibility in that way, or B, there is a whole host of things that you need to avoid. I came from sales where I got asked the same questions about our product day in and day out, over and over and over. And if you don't learn to either thrive in that environment or have fun in that environment, then that could have absolutely been soul draining.
Yeah.
So
it can be. And and that's where it's like, you have to understand that if you're, like posting things that you're inviting that repeatedly, the question is in a way, like, how do you then mitigate that? When what our solution always has been is that, we'll give the quick answer, but we'll have a more detailed answer in a video form that we have a command for. Hey, yes, the answer is yes. And if you want to know why and X, Y, and Z, because I don't want to sit here and just having 3 hours of me just repeating this thing as everybody jumps in. Like, here's the link. You can go watch that for the full detail, and then we can discuss. So it ends up becoming like in a way like what Chris here in chat saying, in the opinion, it's not an elitist toxic issue, but a moderation issue and community management issue. And to a degree, that's yes, like it's how do you manage it? But the thing that I would kind of try to put a cap on this, because Chris is our mod, especially like active on Discord, active on Twitch. He is an all-star. He helps work with you on Gaming Lore, kinda like the guy is incredible. And one of the things that we've all talked about is like, if the channel ever gets where it's growing enough, where like you're made whole, because right now, like, we've been honest, like revenue's been way down. Like, we're getting by, we're all sitting here like
4 months this year.
Yeah.
4 months like, I've ended with a lower bank balance than I started.
Yeah. And so, and I know I've been relying on this a lot more, but we've talked about like, we would love to be able to like pay our mods and pay our community leaders. When we look at some of the really big content creators like Comicstorian, that's one of the things that he's able to do because his size actually supports it. And that's both in like financial support, but also like being here and supporting and watching the videos, etc. Like that is one of the ways of going about it. Now, if things are able to continue to grow, like that's something we want. And when it comes down to community moderation and management, like this is a cost. When we look at world first raids, when we look at some of these things, like there's a level in which that your passion can carry you so far. But at some point you're like, I have to pay the bills. I will be there next week. And one of the things that Comicstorian did to solve this is he hired his raid team. And people might think that's, kind of weird, but no, he hired them to help him make content. It was a business expense. It wasn't like he was paying for clears. He was like, you guys are my co-hosts. This is what we're doing. And when you are able to have that level and that support, you're going to bring about people who are then saying, yeah, I'm passionate about this. This is something I love, but now I can also justify the additional hours that it would take to moderate a full Discord. Like our general policy in our Discord is mods have literally the final say. Like if they say that you did something, I'm going to back them 99.9% of the time.
Because they don't have to mod mods.
I don't have like, we don't.
They got the whole situation.
We cannot, like, not just us, but it's like even with the mods, like it's like, guys, like we are a community of adults. If you cannot have an adult experience, like if you cannot just realize that sometimes it's okay to disagree to agree, sometimes it's okay to sit here and just kind of like, all right, I'm just gonna go do whatever. Like we don't have the resources to sit here and make this our job. And if we did, like we'd be homeless. Like there's that reality. I wanted to point that out because like Chris is a freaking rock star, and I feel like, man, I wish for his and also like with Wes, we got a couple of mods here hanging out in chat. Like with y'all's support, we're able to do this. But if we're able to get bigger, we've always talked about the value y'all bring to this aspect, and that should be in my mind rewarded. I don't think the balance and other people have that approach because there's always this weird line between fandom and passion and
kind of
your time, right? Go ahead.
So, like Ren Karagani is a big member of the and like obviously he does this full time as a living, and so he's found a way to monetize his portion. It's kind of independent of them, but endorsed by them. They do endorse some guide makers, and so like they are kind of funneling resources to those people for the time they do. I think they were a big fan of like Wes Albert for a while, and so like I will say like falling out of favor with the balance not going to go great for you. Happens to be a pretty heavily mentioned community when it comes to like any new player that comes into the game and gets told like, hey, where do I find my melds and stuff? The balance tends to be the be all end all. So ending up on their crap list isn't great. They do hold a lot of power in that way. I came from WoW back when like elitist jerks ran that kind of thing, and in Guild Wars there's a website like that, and so like these resources exist, and it tends to be really nice if they're all in one place because people want to kind of, hey, I'm having trouble healing this tank and I want the tank resources in the same place as the healer resource. So it doesn't tend to make sense to have like a different website for every job or a different website for every role. So it's really nice to have it in that one place for a lot of communities. And some communities do split it up, but the balance has been one of the dominant forces. There's been others, but the balance has been one of the dominant forces in the 14 community, especially for the last couple expansions in like all of these players that come in and want to try Savage and try Extreme, especially when we've had like longer patch cycles where you have people who It's not some WoW player getting into Savage that doesn't know what they're doing or whatever the stereotype is. It's somebody who's been here since ARR, and the content's always been so regular. They've had enough of whatever they've been doing, except now they don't. And so they're like, well, what am I going to do? I guess I'll try Savage. And so,
Yeah.
We ended up with some really well-documented Savage tiers. We ended up with some big community organized events that encouraged people to step into that. And when they start asking questions about melds and rotations and stuff, the balanced Discord is where we drive them. But this game does a couple of things. First of all, you have a primarily written community there. And so you are dealing with a group of people who prefer written guides or are at least comfortable with written guides, which means reading comprehension is just baked in. Everything they've done, they've had to go out and consume this stuff written. And therefore, there is a base skill set that, like, we spend a ton of time in our primary education system trying to make sure everybody at least has a functional ability to read and comprehend. That doesn't mean everybody's equally good at it. It doesn't mean everybody equally developed, but like, it is something where you can see the difference. It was my worst subject in school, was that kind of reading comprehension. I think, with dyslexia, I assume it wasn't always a great one for you. And so that's been a hard subject for me to get better at. And so reading comprehension isn't my go-to. Now, I have a master's degree, so obviously I was able to do it to a passing degree. That doesn't mean I enjoyed it, and it doesn't mean I thrived in that part of it. I did a lot better at like lectures and oral arguments, presentations, things like that. So I think for me, where the friction can pop in is you also have people who are being pushed to a written resource, but maybe that's not how they're best at learning. They're willing to try. And so they get told things like, just read your tooltips.
Yeah. Well, that's where video has a strength, right? That's how essentially we, in a way, got discovered for our content, because like doing our like podcasts and things like that people are like, man, like, who are these guys? But it's like, when it came down to it, it's like, okay, the thing that I constantly get feedback that people really like is the way that I break down and explain it. Now, like, my life goal is to become a teacher, but my life goal also was to have a large family. And those things are antithetical to one another. Like, it's like, okay, well, maybe in my mind, I can go and work to get retirement. So there's a passion that I have for teaching. And there was always this weird confidence level that I understand when people are like, oh, I don't have the experience needed to really do it. And it's like, honestly, I think one of the reasons that has helped me is just like getting out there, not being worried about making mistakes. The thing is that you can learn from those mistakes, you can correct those mistakes, and then you can get better. And so over the course of this time, like I think that's why people regard the controller guides in such a premier form, because like, if you go look at the originals versus now, it's like that we're talking about almost like 10 years of, like, we've only been making YouTube videos for 6. But before that, I was still making controller guides and working and trying to help people out just in a very like direct way. So you fast forward to now, and it's like, okay, now how can I level these up? And I've got these macros to help automatically set up people's hotbars. And so like, overall, like, I've continued to improve as a guide maker, because I think that ultimately is trying to help remove some of that friction. But this is going to tie also into kind of our other topic later, but just kind of tease it with the 14 for casuals. Like, it's great that we have the balanced Discord, but that's a free service that they're providing. Free means you're going to get what you're going to get. It's like rolling the dice with RNG. You are like, when you roll the dice, you might get a great party. Sometimes you might not. Now it comes down to moderation. Like, what's the level of investment and risk and time? Like, if we start just breaking it down into business thought and logic, it's like, okay, yeah, maybe the balance could do better in terms of their moderation and some of these answers, but they're also trying to play the game as well. They're like, what's their time worth? And so then when you factor that as well, is that all of this should be in the game in the first place, right? Like, why do we have to, within Final Fantasy's ecosystem, rely on this to help bridge this gap, right? Like, to bring it back down to it, like, we've talked about, like, just XIV analytics alone, that tool alone, the amount of time that people put in passion into developing that, if the game itself was helping to kind of educate the player, and no, the beginner, trial thing, and they've asked about a mid and a high, like a high end, like education thing, and we have not yet seen that in game, but there are things that the game could do to help bridge the gap. And so I don't think we're talking about players going to the balance because they want to be in the top 5% of the rating group. We're talking about players going to the balance because there doesn't seem to be another decent resource that can take them from, well, I just rolled on everything fine. There was no challenge. All of a sudden I'm being challenged. What am I doing wrong? And then you're like, oh, we one of the things
the balance
we've
doesn't
often
want people like us. They don't want these mid-core players leading the basics, because then when they get to our skill level and want to actually go be really good at this game, then they have to fix whatever bad information we gave. And so anytime, I mean, they have picked individual guide makers who have made like one rotational mistake and just ripped them to shreds.
Yeah.
So like they want to be the be all end all until they realize that means they have to answer questions all the way to the bottom. And some members of that community aren't ready to do that.
Yeah. Now we, wonderful notification. Thank you, Chili, for that. Also, thanks, Real Kitty Hawk, aka Wes, for the 5 gifted subs over on Twitch. Really appreciate that level of support. On that note, to kind of finish this thought, though, is that one of the things we've laughed about, I mean, we have just kind of laughed about it. It's like when we make a kind of getting started guide, I am talking to the player, and my goal, what I've stated publicly multiple times, is to take a beginner level player and stage them to be a mid-core player, to get them better, to get them curious, to get them being able to understand the things that I have learned and that how I am able to do these things that they want to do. I'm not trying to get them to be a savage, but we've seen even in those guides, people will jump in that are like absolute experts. And they're like, how dare you say this one thing? You're setting them up for failure. And it's like, no. I'm inviting them into a deeper relationship with this game. But it's interesting that there is still, like, no matter what, like, going to be a gatekeep metric. I've been blamed for bad tanks in the game when, like, just in our own studies and analytics, we've actually made people better tanks. We haven't made them like the best tanks in the game. Main tank by far, I think, is probably still the king of the castle when it comes down to that. And that was a whole thing a couple of years ago, which was funny with somebody just trying to dunk on him. But like, the idea is that, like, I'm not going to sit here because I'm not going to teach you something I don't know, and I don't have a passion for going and throwing my face against the wall for hours and hours and hours. So what do you think?
So I think the other thing that this is making this come up this time around is changes that were made with Endwalker. Now, there were a lot of changes made with Endwalker that had very positive effects, but that doesn't mean every pro has a con.
Yeah.
One of the changes with Endwalker, which, as they found people wanted to try playing more jobs, as people wanted to jump around into jobs, they wanted communication with jobs to feel cleaner, is they made some combat design choices with the intention of making the game more accessible, where they moved everybody to these fixed 2-minute burst windows.
Yeah.
And that's been the goal, to homogenize jobs towards these 2-minute burst windows. And if your job is sustain based or lives outside that 2-minute burst window, you're kind of getting left behind the bus, because what ends up happening is those burst windows stack on each other. And so if you are a player who slides off your rotation like I am, or you're a player who plays a class that doesn't benefit from those, or just an encounter causes some issue where you make a mistake and you slide off that, your DPS wildly struggles, because what these burst windows are doing is, for kind of a nice visualization, is when you're playing those little games, these are like a Guitar Hero. These are your big combo moments. These are your big combo massive moments. And so they are your massive point totalers, with your points being damage. And so it's gotten to the point where these burst windows every 2 minutes are actually becoming the dominant source of damage in a lot of these encounters. Now, in P1 through 4, it worked out fine. But as we got into 5 through 8, where there was a real check in 8S, any class that slides out of that, or any player that slides out of that, is suddenly actively holding the group back. And that, I think, drove a lot of friction and frustration where there didn't need to be any, because there was an argument before when somebody gets out of line and they get a little too frustrated. They've had a hard day. They've answered the same question 20 times and they just snap and they go, well, maybe just don't be a bad machinist, or some crap like that. Then people go, hey, machinists are getting the clear. You need to chill out. But what happens when machinists aren't getting the clear? right? And so now that person feels like they're vindicated and like they're doing this service to go out and just lock these players away, because the content asked for more. So I think a lot of it is that we've moved to a battle system where actually the 2-minute burst windows, from somebody who being told that I have to get it right for a full 2 minutes straight to have basically a combo button, or else I kind of, fail the song metaphorically. That's a lot more stressful. That's a lot more anxiety. And that instead of, if you mess it up, yeah, it's a lesser combo window, but there's a combo window on the 30, the 60, the 90. You'll get there. That makes it a lot scarier. And I play Warrior, which in theory is a burst job, is how they always describe it. I don't know why it's lower on the DPS end. But in theory, we're a burst job. And so like that basically tells me I should have my Storm's Eye ready to go as we go into the 2-minute window. I should be ready to pop some Bell Cleaves. Like that's where I should be. I should be bursting. But if I miss that, and then I ask, hey, why is my group struggling? Right? Especially when we get into like P5 and P6, which ask a lot of mitigation for tanks. And so I say, hey, I'm here for a rotational question. Then somebody looks at my log and goes, you're terrible at mitigation. I don't know. I think that there's a lot of friction in the community. And so it's easier for these top end players who've already made that climb it would be easier to just play with people who are already up there with you and not reach down and help. And what I think the poster's running into is somebody that has made that choice. Probably just one or two people. It only takes one. It only takes one person on one bad day. They may not even be like that all the time.
Well, right. And we've said and remarked multiple times that, you can take anybody in 30-second clips and you can make them look like the villain, or you can make them look like a hero. It really just kind of depends on, like those interactions. And that's the downside, is that we do remember those negative interactions way more potently, at least for a short term, over the grand scheme of things. We can also, tend to forget some of the bad things that happen. And Izzy kind of points out an interesting thing. She's saying, to play devil's advocate here, the balance isn't really there to be nice and welcoming. It's there for optimization. It's just the numbers and the analytics. And sometimes I've seen, and this is where, like, I've talked about the idea of the kind of the casual elitist, because there is the idea of elitism on the casual side. Like, you don't pay my sub is a really good mantra that you can see applied to that kind of that individual, where essentially like, oh, I'm here, roll out the red carpet for me, as opposed to like, I'm, here's the numbers, like you're just not performing. And this content requires you to perform. Like, for example, let's say I was negative 20% to where I needed to be. Like, there's a line, I'm 20% below the line. I'm asking 7 other people to pick up and carry not just their own self, but to make up my difference. Otherwise, we're just all wasting our time. And that's one of the things where we've talked about the difficulty in Savage, and I've had many conversations like on the live streams. Feels like these are dances. Like, you need to learn the steps, and then you need to perform your part of the dance as best as possible. But the challenge isn't in learning the dance. I think most people can learn mechanicals and steps and things like that. It's in finding 7 other people willing to also struggle with you on that, and the fact is, like, it's interesting is that we are seeing pugs, being able to get, their clears, but not through all the way through the tier itself. And that's going to be something. Point. Oh, they've gotten pug 8s done.
Yeah,
nice.
Yeah. People are doing it.
Okay. I hadn't heard of that. Yeah.
Yeah. People are getting clears. People can clear ultimates in Party Finder. That's not the preferred method. As far as number of hours spent, and as far as consistency spent, but it is a method for people that have less consistent schedules and don't want to deal with that. There are people that like that; they thrive in that. And Mo Raines argues that makes you a better player because you're forced to continually adjust to different strats and all of that. Mm-hmm. So I just think that like Warrior. In chat that there's a note saying Warrior doesn't really have a rotation. You just keep things on cooldown. Yeah, except that like I drop global cooldowns when I'm pressed in mechanics, or I break basic 1, 2, 3 combos. And so I think it's really easy for when you're asking why a balanced mentor gets really toxic. If I go in there and ask some question about a meld or something like that, or I go in and ask a question about a MIT optimization within P5 and I link my logs and they see that that I apparently can't count to 3 because that's what my log says, then they're like, why do I even have to help this trash? Like, can't even count to 3. And it's true. Like when I'm pressed for mechanics, I can't count to 3. Apparently it's 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 1, 1, 2, 3. Like every 40 seconds or more when pressed in mechanics, what happens is, inner release comes up and I forget that I was mid combo. And so I spam my fell cleaves and then I just start back at 1, regardless of where I was. And so I let a ton of potency and a ton of gauge fall on the floor every single time I'm in an encounter that I'm uncomfortable in. And because of the amount of time I have to raid, the little bit of savage and extreme I'm doing, a lot of times it's 1 clear. So you're not seeing something. It's like, well, that'll get better with practice. I'm not doing practice. I'm clearing it once and then calling it done. So if I go into the balance Discord and post a log, how do I get a log? I don't run ACT. How do I get a log? All right, great. I've agreed to break terms of service. I've got my log. Can you help me? And then I post it. Now, are they mad at me because like I'm asking questions? Would you rather somebody that plays like me not ask questions? And so when you ask why people are toxic, yes, I can understand why they find it frustrating to have to interact with somebody who it should be, why don't you come back to me when you can count to 3? But also, in theory, it is meant to be a resource. In theory, it is meant to be like, well, what helped you count to 3 when you were flustered?
Yeah.
Because apparently you've mastered that. And that's great. I haven't.
Yeah. It's always interesting because also people respond differently to other people, right? Where sometimes tough love is the answer. Sometimes it's like, dude, you got to go work on your rotation. There's nothing I can teach you until you can press this button and then this button and then this button. And if that's too hard, if you're too fragile for that kind of feedback, there's other things in this game to enjoy. Like maybe Savage isn't for you, and that's a perfectly acceptable answer. Now it's a matter of how then it gets delivered is usually where this ends up, hitting the road,
and
right?
You've labeled people as mentor, right? So when you're being told to screw off, you feel like you're being told to screw off on behalf of the community. Yeah. Because you want the most knowledgeable people in your mentor position, but you also want the most welcoming people in your position. And when those are not the same person, that's where leadership within the balanced Discord has to make a really tough call. Do you have people that are really nice and welcoming, but risk confusing or misleading? Mm-hmm. Or do you have people that have the information, but occasionally have to be reminded, I know you think you're just joking. I know you think that was like a nice sarcastic way to do that, but this is a text-based forum and you came across like a dick.
And text can also get really misunderstood, in that regards, because you can infer tone based off your own mood. Now, that's why one of the challenges I always try to put on myself is I always try to read the text and y'all's comments in the most positive light. And so that actually sometimes annoys people. They're like, Brian killing them with kindness. I'm like, oh, thank you. That's so sweet. They're like, I was trying to insult you. I was like, oh, that you can't insult me. It's my superpower. On that note, though, it's like I think essentially what I would advocate for, especially if people find this kind of story frustrating or what have you, is that we need better resources in game. We need the game to kind of help, I believe, to step up. And the only way that would ever happen is more and more feedback in that regards. Otherwise, review this as a resource. And if you get a snippy response, like you just got to let it roll off your back and just move on. Because these people are not like paid, in that regards. And even if they are, like, it's like in terms of like, how much time do you have? And where do you want to put that time in? Like, I know that I've remarked on this as like, for somebody just like giving me some like for this community and the hate that we're easily able to like disperse onto people. I'm like, I'm working on this thing for y'all because y'all asked for it, and I would rather just go play. It's like, this is time that I'm like, Brian, you haven't done this or this. It's like, no, I decided to pour 30 hours into this over here because it's going to make making people get into the game much better, and that's a win in my book. But yeah, you got to pick and choose your battles. You got to pick and choose where you get time, because it's not like I can I can be in the same place at the same time doing multiple different things. That's why you don't,
I'd be
somebody was
reminded
trying to
that-
get me to do like extreme guides. I'm like, that's already covered. Like I don't have the time to throw into that. I'm not going to have joy in that. So anyway, what do you think, Chris?
I think be reminded that not everybody is you, right? And so I had a chance to talk to some people that have been involved in the balance, and I don't know what level they're at, but they were telling me that like one of their frustrations, they were being really nice to me, but like I had mentioned, I was like, yeah, I don't. There's a reason I don't do rotation guides, but there are people that do, and they immediately mentioned the person that they didn't like that does rotation guides, and I think it's really unfair to that person. And my response was, well, what don't you like about their guides? And they're like, well, they made this potency mistake here and it misleads, and they act like they're such an authority, but they can't even clear some of the content themselves. And I was like, so you can clear all the content on those jobs? And I said, yeah. And I was like, and you can do it either without mistakes or at least understand to a simulation degree what perfection is. Yeah. And you can continually stay on top of that information every single time that it could possibly change if there's changes to a lodestone post or whatever, where they change something with that job. Yeah, I do. Great. Have you made any videos on that? No. Then how do people get to that information? It's in your head.
Mm-hmm.
So like, we're going to use the best information made available. And so if your information is better, do it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, then do it. And like, I don't mean that. And like, they're like, well, that sounds kind of aggressive. And I was like, I don't know how else to say it. Like, until there's a better option, what do you expect people to do? They're going to drink from the trough that's available.
Right.
So would you rather people just ask the question into the void and been like, well, none of the perfect people are willing to answer, so I guess let's just leave them alone? Like, they're going to go to the person that says, hey, I'd be happy to help you.
Yeah.
So I didn't even focus on, I like that person's content, but before I even focused on that, I just said, well, fine. Let's just assume for a moment you're right. Let's just permaban them from the platform. What happens then? Let's follow your logic. And they're like, well, I don't have time to learn how to do all that stuff. And I was like, and they did. So do you respect that takes an amount of effort on their part? And that's what they're focused on. And they're trying to be helpful, and that there is some good intent there, even if they miss the mark sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So have you reached out to them and said like, hey, I just wanted to toss some, like, I'd be happy to kind of help proofread your stuff or stuff like that. And then be aware that if you do proofread, YouTube is a first or get out type game sometimes. So like, that doesn't mean I'm going to take 6 weeks to make some noted changes. No. Right. If they're done with their guide, it's got to go. Yeah,
it's got to go. And I talked to Happy about this specifically. It's that, and we kind of laughed and memed on Reddit when they were all like designing the perfect way that YouTubers should roll out their guides. There should be the day one guide, the week one guide, then the edited and fully like community focused, like this is what the community term guide. And Happy said like he took it up on himself to go and like, I want to make the premier guide and I'm going to roll it out a couple of weeks. And when he went and looked at the numbers, they were nothing. Nobody needs that perfect guide. They've all figured it out. Everybody just kind of wants to know what they're stepping into. So the day one guides, even if they have mistakes, are the guides that people go to.
And they get people through content.
Yeah, they get the win. They get
the win. People are like, well, I know how to do it so much better now.
Cool.
Okay, then it sounds like you don't need a guide for that. Like,
right.
like the guide was there to bridge the gap between I cannot clear the content and now I can. Yeah. And as long as it did that, well, now oh my gosh, I thought about it and I can do it so much better now. Great. Sounds like we don't need a guide for that.
Cheers.
And that's why that guide dies, because the optimizations get handled.
Right.
What we need is people who are like, I will not step in there if I have not seen the fight. Hey guys, Happy here, and I just want to show you the fight. Okay. That's all it needs to be.
That's all it needs to be. And it's the I think it usually just comes down to like the textbook versus the reality. I see this happen a lot. Like when you go and you study, like this is the textbook ideal, and then you step into the reality of how people manage their code, and you're like, okay, well, let's work towards that. The ideal is there to something as a goal we should strive for, but the reality is this is all the world we live in, and this is just the way it is. And so I saw Chumbany excuse me, somebody in chat. Lucky Archery says, is it considered toxic to write a post on Reddit rather than actually reach out to the mod of the Discord and the server in question? And this is kind of where like that, like, almost kind of what's the term that I people use, like where they're just like virtue signaling. That's the thing I'm getting at. It's like, oh, look at me. I'm being hurt. I'm being hit. You know, like, oh, how mean is the 14 community? It's like, yeah, we have our assholes, like, and we know where they are, and they know who they are, and we shouldn't ignore them because they're giving the community, I think, a bad representation. But I agree with Lucky. It's like, that's, reach out to the mod. All these rushing to public, you know, like, oh, you know, somebody was mean to me, like, let's publicly shame them, you know, on this regard. I think that's also a part of the problem, because that gets them,
and they may have done that as
clout.
well.
Yeah, and maybe they did, but at least if they did, they didn't.
Maybe for all the times that they've done it, we're not talking about it, right? So like this did. If the goal
like, and there's a tool.
It did it.
And now here it is.
It's on FFXIV discussion. I just want to have a discussion about it. I don't necessarily want to like get them fired or have an argument with them. I just want to talk about it.
Yeah. How do we improve
FFXIV discussion? That's what it's for.
That's what it's for.
So I do want to stop and thank Astrager for 10 gifted subs, and 100 bits, and Chili for 100 bits, and Les Banana for subscribing, and Kitty Hawk for gifting 5 subs.
Yeah. And
an anonymous gift to Lucky Archery.
Thank you, guys.
All back to back to back.
Thank you guys so much. Thanks also for watching our YouTube videos. That's a huge help as well. So that is going to be this for the topic. We've got a new topic right now, or we're going to take a little break so that way nobody ends up getting caught into ads. Bellular released a interesting video kind of talking about the world revamp for WoW as they build to their 20th year. I think there's a really interesting discussion to be had, especially as it relates to Final Fantasy 14, as we get into year 10 of ARR next year as well. So there's a lot of interesting moving parts. I really am excited to get y'all's thoughts on this as well. So if you guys give us around 2 minutes, we're going to take a little break, and we'll be right back.
Okay. 2 minutes on the clock. Now only subscribers can hear me, and people on YouTube. You're trying to work out what the channel boost thing is. It says your channel's being boosted by Twitch. So apparently you can use channel points when that happens, and then we get like pushed front page. We've never been selected before, so that would be news to me. And I thought they notified the creator when it was happening, but
yeah, it says boost in progress 2%.
Okay,
that's
yeah,
what I'm seeing
so you can donate channel points, and it's like 1,000 per day per person. So it's meant to be so that you know, and then if we hit the goal, if we hit the boost, then you end up on front page. And like I watched Jay the Beard the other day, and he had like 500,000 billion people watching. It was seriously like 600 people or something watching because you're front page. And so it's just a neat thing. I think Hector and Junebob are great. I will say that Junebob was the go-to until Hector got his out faster. And now a lot of people, so like it's still like that. I had 1,000 people in here. That did not show on our end. But welcome people if that's true.
Yeah, it shows like 86 people are here. So over on Twitch,
that sounds more correct.
YouTube, we numbers have been. I really love that how many people have been enjoying the live show. So
okay, well I refreshed it, so I lost time of the ad counter. But
yeah, thanks guys for the 46 likes over on YouTube. By the way, I'm gonna stress my likes.
Being recommended to 1.1 thousand. Oh, that's the number of people sitting on their homepage right now that we are qualified for. Like, hopefully they're not like shoving our homepage into like somebody who comes here to watch sewing. Like it's the same when we were YouTube partner on the rise, like to people that was applicable, or like to gamers, right? Somebody's like, I like politics. Like, you should like work to game. No. So Cosmo moseyed over here for the first time because of the little thing. Well, welcome. Use points to boost. I have no idea how all that works.
I don't see a thing. Use points to boost. Where do y'all see that?
Just log into Twitch as a viewer and
stream now. Recommending to new viewers. Well, cool.
I don't know. Okay.
And welcome,
I think it caps. It was the banner over the chat. Oh, neat. All right. And then like I think you can only do the points like once per day or something like that. Like it's meant so that it takes a lot of people. You cannot cheer in your own channel. Oh, well, obviously.
Is it cheering or is it points?
I think it's points.
Can I just say like
cool?
Vote it up? Like test.
I'm not worried about it. It's a feature that they were trying out and it never really.
So I don't know if that did that anything.
Clearly. They've done a lot of really cool stuff lately. You ready to go? Whoa. Hello. Why am I blurry? What you doing, camera? I can wipe you off. Can you focus? I have to sit this close for it to focus.
Get real close. Chris is a blurry blob.
Why can't I? What am I doing?
That's funny.
What is it doing? What is it doing?
Thank God we're a audio medium. That background is crispy.
Okay, so you can focus right there. Why is it not focusing?
This is the best.
How did you guys unfocus me? Why would you do that?
Who redeemed that channel point? Let's make Chris a blurry blob.
Is this
Brian and the blur here?
Your camera was unplugged. I know that. No,
please run IV cam.
No, I'm not doing IV.
You have a camera that has like direct. Oh, there you are. Direct link to like
a virtual cam. It allows you to use
your account and routing number. Like, please.
IV cam is a piece of software you can install on an iPhone that allows you to use it as a virtual camera.
Mm-hmm.
So they put the I before it because anything dealing with iPhone, you have to put an I before it, which is why they had to start calling things Apple because they're like, we cannot manage this. We did not make the iToaster. All right.
Yeah. Finally, Chris installing that PS1 filter.
I think it's crisper now than I was before.
Yeah.
It just needed to be slapped around a little bit.
Little. All right. We ready to jump into topic number 2?
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Topic number 2. Today we're going to be talking about the world revamp. So welcome in, everybody. Thanks so much for checking out this video. We're going to be talking about WoW 11.0. This will coincide, I believe, sometime after Final Fantasy 14 7.0. If you guys enjoy these highlights, these videos, and more, note that you can smash that like button, comment, share, and subscribe if you haven't already. We do these live shows generally Monday, Wednesday, Friday, but Chris is going to go celebrate with his wife. So we will have a kind of a little content gap over here on YouTube for you guys for just a little bit. So beyond that, Chris, you sent me this video. I've been listening to it. I actually listened to it twice. And I really, really enjoyed it. And honestly, there was a part of me, like as a non-WoW guy, that I was like, that is interesting. We've long been questioning how do these long persistent games continue to evolve? And we also have talked about Final Fantasy XIV's strength and weakness in its narrative and its story-driven approach, because that just continues to put content up a tower and ultimately making it very difficult to invite people into the very tip top of the tower. Yoshi P has talked about how difficult it would be to go in and rework those things, rework those assets. But they're also seemingly doing that in the Final Fantasy XIV world. But why don't you give a rundown of what Bellular has discovered and why he's excited for the future of WoW as it enters in? This would be around the time of its 20th anniversary, which I think is pretty daggum significant. What do you think?
So WoW is in Shadowlands right now. For anybody that doesn't know the number on that, that is 9.0. And then we are going into 10.0 with Dragonflight. I believe the predicted date is in November of 2022. So this is already looking out 2 years past the expansion that has not yet released as of right now. So you're kicking it out a ways. A fair bit of what he's analyzing is the time skip element to the narrative that Dragonflight implies, so that we can kind of start distancing ourselves and start allowing characters to mature and grow. And it's not a massive time skip, but starting to kick it out a little bit of a distance, because Azeroth has been hit back to back to back to back. And so it's been very hard to kind of distance yourself from anything where maybe the writing or the place we went or the enemy we went, you want to do something different with. So the WoW timeline's been very, very dense. And so as you start to say, okay, let's start distancing ourselves from that. Maybe it's time for a change in the way we handle the writing. Maybe it's a time for a change when we handle the way the characters. I don't think Anduin's in charge of the Alliance right now because he's kind of AWOL, and he'll show up when he wants to show up. And so I think you have a chance to start saying, if there are people that are not around, if you have leadership, and this is something that is important as we look at like, where is Guild Wars 2 headed from here? Where is Final Fantasy 14 headed from here? Because like, that's why I wanted to talk about this as a topic, because it's not just World of Warcraft. We're going to get to a point where you have to decide, how do we keep a game not feeling like we're just stretching it out, forever. You've watched those TV shows that they've stayed one season too long. And that's because they didn't have an exit strategy. And they either needed to end earlier or they needed to have a pivot. And the pivot narratively is the foundation of what allows us to make pivots mechanically. And so as we look at games that are starting to get to the point where it's time for maybe an engine upgrade, some graphical updates. No, graphics are not the be all end all, but they are part of game design. When we look at updating mechanics, updating things that are starting to feel like that's not a good reason anymore. Like, why can't my inventory be bigger? Why is my cosmetic system clumsy? What's going on with monetization in this game? They're just behind because they were operating on best practices, 10 or more years ago. And I think this opens the door for WoW to say, it's a different WoW. And in my mind, that's a get back to basics type thing. Get back to fundamentals. We've continued moving the goalposts so many times that we can't even see the stadium anymore. And I think this is a chance to just say, okay, new stadium. Let's get back to what made World of Warcraft. And that's a heavy emphasis on the world of Warcraft. And maybe in this day and age, that is better writing and more prevalent voice acting and all these things because the budgets are there. But at the end of the day, the world was the star. And it feels like we've lost that. And so what would that look like in World of Warcraft? What would that look like in Final Fantasy? And do these games deserve to live 30 years, 40 years? Do we get to a point where it's 50 years and you've got multiple careers that have gone their entire career working on one game that was both around before them and will be around after them?
I think that's going to be something really interesting, especially if they are kind of going in that route. Because the question is always like, do they go with a WoW 2? We do know, like, especially when it looks at just that when you look at it, it's not like there's just one player in the space. You have Amazon stepping into it. You've got, with Ashes of Creation, you have, I'm forgetting the name of it, Intrepid. There we go. And then you also have like, things like that with Blue Protocol. So we're all looking at like built on the latest round of technology, like looking at it. And the things that hold those games back ends up being that it doesn't have 15 and 20 years of content. That's usually the general frustration that players who step into these games say, hey, I beat it. And what do I do now? And it's like, well, now you wait. And it's like, oh, there's not all this legacy content. There's not all this other stuff that I can do. There's not a well-formed community that all has a shared love or hatred for this game that we can either say how it's the best game in the world, or we can just all like play it and grumble about how it's like, like, oh man, they really like let this thing go and or what have you. Like those shared communal aspects like take time to develop. But what the new games do have is they do have the concept of cloud and distributed technology. You have like engines that like really bring out things that are not being done in these older games, just things like that separate. And that's one of the things that people who step into these newer games remark and they feel. And that's why you see a lot of pressure, I think, being put on Ashes of Creation. I think before the show, somebody was asking if we've seen the Lazy Peon video. And it's like, I saw one of his breaking down the systems of Ashes and that's where my biggest concern for the future of that game is. I keep seeing people saying like, if Ashes fails, then I don't know what it will be for MMOs. And I honestly don't know if those same people who are saying that are going to stick around with Ashes, because they'll get bored and they'll want to go do something else because they've been trained that it's perfectly fine and you jump from game to game to game, because that's just the nature of it. They're not going to relive their teenage years when they had no money and nothing but time, to experience that. But in the case of WoW, instead of going to 2.0, like what I would like to see is like, he talks a lot about the zone redesign, bringing back the world tree, like all these things, a lot of these things that mean nothing to me as somebody who cannot and has not gotten into the game. But what would be interesting to see is that if, we're talking about in the back end, engine refresh, does it come to console? Does it say, hey, listen, we know we've been here, but now we see, especially on the playing field across the board, like what does a World of Warcraft 11.0 that would come out to console, have like controller support, open it up to an even wider range of players who maybe have fallen away and just want to jump in and dip out and in? Like, what do you think, Rez?
So you noted a couple things there that you don't have context on. So in Cataclysm, they did a lot of back-end realignment. And as a result, the kind of front end, what the players are playing, didn't feel as polished as Wrath of the Lich King. And so for many people, that was the turning point where their relationship with World of Warcraft began to slide. I think Firelands was a great tier. I think there was some great stuff in Cataclysm, but overall, like compared to Wrath, it just felt like there was so much going on off screen that on screen, I don't think it had the same punch as Wrath of the Lich King, which is why that's such an anticipated relaunch in Classic, September 26th, is Wrath of the Lich King coming back, and Ulduar Ulduar has been held up as one of the best raid tiers in any MMORPG ever. It's what it's what led to a lot of the leadership that is there today is how well that was received.
But that's essentially kind of one of my biggest complaints about MMOs and how they've evolved into this raid culture. Like that is the pinnacle piece of content where, like you said, like bringing back the world, like if they were to balance it in a way that it's like raid's great, cool, awesome, people like it, but also within the world, like you're out and, but that's just my take. But go ahead, continue.
So then with future expansions, they did less of that kind of off screen and things got done more on screen. And so we had a chance to the elves lived in this big giant tree, and a character burned that tree down, and players got to go take part in that. Alliance players got to rescue refugees in this event, and Horde players got to help basically burn this thing down. And then it was gone. That was a pre-patch event. It was like your 1.0 sending out days, and you were either there or you weren't. I did it as a Horde player. It was incredible to be a part of. As somebody who started the game as a Night Elf player, and went to Horde and played Druid, and being in touch with nature and all this, it felt nuts. It was like, what are we doing? This is crazy. And then the Undead City, you thought the Alliance was going to attack the Undead City, and then that same character basically bombed the Undead City. And so we've lost these cities, and there is this concern of, are they just going to try to write it over? Are they just going to try to smooth it out? And with 11.0, they just do a Cataclysm and they're like, and things are different now. And so how do we handle things moving forward? And what was interesting narratively and would have to do with world design, what kind of events do we do in game, is that the official statement is no. If the world tree comes back, if Lordaeron comes back, if Gilneas is if any of these places that have a history come back or are destroyed, if anything changes, that is all going to be something that happens in game now. We're not doing any of that off-screen stuff anymore, which I think is a real departure to say you don't get to just jump to your favorite parts of the timeline. It can't just be about these big cinematic moments and then you just ride over whatever it takes to get there. We're telling a story here. We're living in a world. And so I think that was the right statement that says, that's what we're experiencing in Final Fantasy right now. You don't get to just say it ended and now we're in the next thing. Right. We've got a transition. And so the patches 0.1 and 0.2 are slower because they're not a finale. And so we're just getting our engine started on this next saga. And it leaves a lot of questions, but not questions that are burning and keeping you up at night. You're like, yeah, okay. And that's part of it. We're at the beginning of a 10-year journey. And so I think it was exciting to see WoW take that same mentality. And hopefully they can make that happen. And I think it starts with 10.0. And I think it's something that you don't have to trust them with 10.0. They have to show us with 10.0. And then they have to show us again with 11.0. Yeah, but let's assume for a moment we have 3 years in a row of good development, good storytelling, good world design, good mechanics, good management of their power systems and all of that. It's the sort of thing that says we are ushering in a new chapter for World of Warcraft. And really, I think, starts to say, okay, and we're going to try to keep up with games like Final Fantasy that are off to their next chapter, and whatever Guild Wars is doing, whatever all these new MMOs we're talking about is. People are excited about Riot. People are excited about Ashes. People are excited about Star Citizen, all these different games. Meanwhile, ESO's cranking out content. You know, there are games that are still just doing their thing. I think to see WoW say, yeah, that actually tells me they're listening more than all they're sitting around a round table looking at the camera saying, we're listening, we're listening, we're listening. Like, I don't care about that. Show me.
Right. Yeah. It's time for action, and action is going to speak a lot louder for words, because they've burned a lot of that trust. Like, if you ever think of that as a bank of withdrawing and depositing, I think even back in the day, they were talking about like we're deposit, like the players are depositing their trust in here, and then eventually they end up going on this big spending spree of that. And so what you said is absolutely true. I think if 10.0 comes out and people, it doesn't have to be the be all end all, but if people are like, all right, like it's starting to actually like feel really good, and they follow that up with a strong 11.0, like that's where all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, WoW is gearing up for the next decade with a fight on its hands. You know, like you get, people have a lot of nostalgia. We kind of talked about it. We don't actually have a topic for this specific show, but about how like there's this mentality in 14 that the reason why 14 is having such drama and such struggle right now is because of all these WoW players that have come in and ruined the community. And, you know, like we saw like a thread over that, and it's like, that is such BS, you know, overall. Like that's not in that case. I would say that anybody also probably most likely pointing the finger at WoW is at one point a WoW player. Like, it's just like in that regards, because there's lots of really good experiences with that.
It's been over 120 million people have played WoW.
Yeah.
14's coming up on 40 million.
Right. So it's like
statistically within MMORPGs, 14 players have played WoW. Statistically, some of us have done that, which means some of us didn't come over here because we didn't still like WoW. Some still play both. Some go back and forth. So I think that like idea of like, this is the time they're all coming over and there's charging the castle. Not to mention, you've been telling them for years that your game is better. Now stay out. Like, what is your plan?
Asmongold's going to bring his toxic community. Meanwhile, like, well, we got to go bully him and get banned from the game.
And then now he's not playing. Why isn't he playing?
It is poetic, to say the least. So no, I think essentially like what would be interesting for me as a non-WoW guy, it's like, especially as you look at like another decade, like lay the foundation, really deliver 11.0, and then essentially I think what would be interesting to hear from them as they gear up at 20 is like, we're going to 30. Like Yoshi P sat down and said, hey, we got another 10-year plan. We're going to do another 10 years of this game, and that's kicking off, and then 7.0 is going to actually most likely come out, and then the game will turn 11 in terms of if we're aging it from ARR. It's already 13, I think, years old from the announcement, 12 years old, etc. Blah blah blah, whatever. But then all of a sudden you start looking at that, like, okay, great. What does 14 look like, especially if the 7.0 comes out in 2024? That would also be, you know, maybe in the beginning of the year. WoW, you know, 11.0 at the end of the year, November, you know, maybe, you know, for that aspect. And then both of them gearing up for another 10 years. And so I'm wondering what we'll see them learn from each other, because there's things that I've heard a lot of WoW players come in and say, oh, I really like this system because it doesn't make me do all these needless things, where in WoW I felt like I had to do all these pointless things just to do this one thing. And then in 14 it's like the concept of like, oh, if you want to get into the game, you know, that like if I wanted to get into 11.0, like I kind of can. But one of the things that does concern me, and this will be interesting, kind of get your thoughts on it, because the justification of the level squish, it helped to ease a little bit of a burden of the anxiety of like stepping in. But now, didn't they say that it's actually going to 70 and it's not going to do that 50 to 60? So my hope is that if that 14 looks at that and says, no, we're not going to do that, you know, like I would feel horrible. And honestly, it's like when they said they were going to 70, I was like, oh, so it's not a level squish. It's just them just resetting this to climb back up again to 120 or 130. What do you think?
It was. So here's the journey that went through.
Yeah.
So Ian came out at BlizzCon and said, levels don't make sense. Because what happens is you have so many levels that you either ask a new player to level through 600 hours of content to join us. And that's insane. And what Final Fantasy does every day. He didn't say that last part. Now, or you speed them through it, in which case it goes level up. And you go, which means it doesn't matter. So why even have levels if they're so worthless?
Yeah.
Right. And so he wanted to usher back to the true old school RPG game days like D&D, where at the end of a session, you level up. It's a big deal. Oh my God, I got a new spell. I can't wait to use it. It's a huge deal. It is it's wildly important. So he wants every single level to have a reward that is meaningful. Every single level should matter and should feel big. Step one, there can't be 6 billion of them. I can't have 6 billion rewards, or it's too much. So let's condense it down to a number. So let's condense it down to, let's say 50. We think our game takes 50 base levels to get every single reward handed to you. Maybe at this level you unlock the ability to mount. Maybe at this you unlock something that really finishes out your rotation. And so let's just kind of build that out over 50. And then we'll have the current expansion bolt 10 levels on. And so then we'll talk about what this means. What do you do for the 1 to 50? And that turns into all these other systems that they tried, Chromie Time and all that. And so that's what matters. And in my head, I thought, very cool. And they said, it's an incredibly manual thing, but we're building in systems that make it dynamic. So if we ever have to do stat squishes in the future, all that stuff, they've moved to this dynamic stat squish system. So in my mind, what that means is that every expansion, all 60s become 50s, all 50s become 47s, or whatever the math works out, because they basically take the total amount of experience you have, they adjust the amount of experience it takes to get to 60 to now that's what it takes to get to 50, and then you just end up wherever on the sliding curve you end up. And so you log in, you lose a level, but you have the same amount of experience. They didn't take any of your experience away. They just increased how much experience it takes to get to each point, and you just adjust down. And all 60s drop to 50. And then we go back and we drop our Shadowlands borrowed power system. And I thought it actually kind of solved the borrowed power thing a little bit, other than the inherent problems it has. And then it says, no, you lost that. You're 50 again. And now we're going to bolt on 10 levels. Now, fast forward 2 years. Okay, so what are we doing after Shadowlands? We're going to bolt on another 10 levels. But doesn't that go against everything you said before? And he goes, well, we just figure that, like, yeah, it'll probably be a problem again, but that's probably 10 years from now. So worry about that then. And all that told me is Ian's going to retire sometime in the next 10 years, and he doesn't give a crap who he hands it off to. And I don't know how else to say that. Like, I like a lot of the things that Ian has done for the game. I've disagreed with plenty of things he's done for the game, but ultimately with this, that tells me I fixed it for the amount of time that I think it needs to be fixed for. And after that, somebody else can clean up my mess.
I honestly, like, one of the things that when I look at my experience, like, Final Fantasy XI held on to its level 75 for so long. Like, it never was always increasing that, but people really enjoyed that. You hit this, and then there was this other kind of systems that would open up, and that's honestly what I wish we would see make a return, because there is a value in the level 60 as a cap in terms of World of Warcraft. It makes it less burdensome to step into. I wish that they would keep the cap at 60 and then have some kind of post experience system. What Guild Wars does. Right. And so the Guild Wars, I think, really nails it. Right. Once 80, always 80. And then all of a sudden, right. And
50 is the real cap. And then there's 10 post.
And so, like, that's where, when it comes down to it, like, to bring this into kind of Final Fantasy 14 terms, my hope, my wish, my dream would be, like, just cap it at 99. Like, have the next expansion 7.0 take the level to 99, which is a classic Final Fantasy level, and then have a post experience leveling whatever. And never again, no, there's 8.0, 9.0, 10.0, the level cap is still 99. And then if you want to have and engage in all of this, in this case optional leveling, then you can, and there's rewards that are structured to it that are fun, little glamour stuff, etc. Like, that would be the ideal, as opposed to, like, if 14 ever said, like, guys, 120, 130, like, this is, like, not only that, it's the story itself, because, like, all of a sudden it's like you just have this, like, okay, here's this, like, you're gonna spend months and months and months just trying to get
through 1,000 years of war.
1,000 years of war, then all of a sudden it's like, okay, then they ever squish it, like they ever do what WoW did, it's like, that will not feel good. I even said, I was like, as a player who's looking at this, I honestly hope that new MMOs kind of look at this and seeing like, hey, how does this game that's now 20 years old handle it? Not great. It's like they had to pull back all these levels. And Ian, it wasn't also wrong having all this extra stuff. Like, what does that even mean for the player? How do we make that feel significant? And it's like, well, I honestly go back to Final Fantasy 11. They eventually and ultimately raised the level cap to 99, but it still sat at that. So they kind of hit that Final Fantasy branded level cap that it was in across all of their games. And so like I think it's like, yeah, pick a level cap and then essentially design an XP system that is a post progression stuff so that in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, it's still like you're not sitting here telling somebody they have an insurmountable amount of work to do in that
regards.
And
if people like leveling and having skills and the devs want that, then do that and have us be, oh, do you have your 7.0 plus 10? So you're 99 plus 10. And then it's like, just like Aether rates, right? You can fly in some zones and not others. So you can still level in each expansion, but like, but I don't know that works for 14 because 14 is linear narratively, as opposed to something like ESO or Guild Wars where I can do things out of order if I want to. There's a preferred path, but I don't have to stick to it. And so the ability to kind of do expansions out of order, WoW's crafting system, I can level up for each individual expansion. So I can go do the Burning Crusade crafting after Shadowlands crafting. And so I think there's a real step there for like, what do you do? Now, these problems we're talking about that are in the future of 14 that are hitting WoW now, they are problems that result from the mistake of being successful for too long. Like that's what they're being penalized for. So before we get well, they should have seen this coming. New World's handling this better. We don't know that. Like get New World to 10 years old and see if it's like, well, that was exactly a series of bad choices. So it's really easy for everything to work great in your game for the first 2, 3, 10 years. Mm-hmm. It's after that. What do you do when you've accidentally put too much content in your game? So that's really where World of Warcraft is at, is that what do they do with 11.0? And it's a guideline for what would Final Fantasy either want to do or not to do. Because learning from WoW does not mean copying WoW. Learning from WoW can also be, I watched them do that. We actually thought about doing that. It does kind of chart a path for what are the options that Final Fantasy could consider, because inevitably they will run into the same issue.
Mm-hmm. Now, Chris says, as kind of my final thought on this topic, before we move into kind of your final thought, says, love how discussions on certain game mechanics so often just do it like Guild Wars 2, because that game really needs more players and more praise. And I was going to be like, the joke is that we are now the Guild Wars 2 marketing team, because Guild Wars 2, I think its greatest weakness is that they don't really market their game. And it usually comes down to Guild Wars 2, like they really nailed that. You're right. They really nailed that level cap. This is what it is. And then here's these other systems that you can engage with post level cap, meaning that horizontal progression that really, I think that speaks to me as a player in and of itself. What's your final thought, Chris?
I mean, Guild Wars has its own flaws, so it's easy to point to the things Guild Wars is doing well and say like, WoW and 14 need to learn from those, but it has its own flaws. But I do agree it's doing a lot well, and it's doing a lot that's allowed it to age gracefully. And that's something that like 14 is going to struggle with, because they've built a standard of you need to clear all the story from day one to now. And like, that was fine, except that you've continued stacking more story on top. And like, if 600 hours is not too much to ask of a new player, is 1,000 hours? Like, what's the number? There's a number. It used to be like, well, maybe 300 is too enough. Oh, 300 is not too much. But now it's got to be 500 hours now, especially because now we're starting to say you have to clear raid series, you have to clear alliance raid, you have to do Hildebrand, you have to do your class quests and your role quests, and if you hadn't, you don't like this game. And so like, if we're going to continue lording that over people, what exactly are you asking? And it's hard. And the game itself encourages a lot of that. So like, WoW and 14 have both created the problems that they're heading into or are already in, by just setting up something that worked really well when the game was younger than it is now, which is something I think a lot of us can relate to. We all made choices earlier in life because we thought it would work out fine, and then you get to a different age and you're like, that was dumb. I wish I'd made some different decisions earlier, because things could be better for me now. So I think it's something we can relate to, and it's not to go back and throw hate on those younger versions. It's just to say, okay, now that I recognize what that problem is, how do we fix it from here? And what do we do moving forward? Because the answer can't just be, well, let me just keep ignoring it. Now that I know it's a problem, it's only going to get worse.
Yeah. Anyway, guys, always let us know what you guys are thinking in the comments below. Also, as a part of these live shows as well. If you guys enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe, and share for more work to game discussion content, especially around MMOs, especially around it is a good time to be a gamer. Like, I think I've seen a lot of people MMO players, I think, are really eating good right now. Like, a lot of good choices, a lot of good things to be excited for in just the genre itself. And now we're gonna take a small break, and we're gonna talk about the Reddit post, is Final Fantasy 14 just for casuals or for casuals? And kind of give our thoughts on this. Chris and I ended up having a long discussion as my kids scream in the upstairs room next to me about this kind of last night. So I'm very curious to see y'all's thoughts as well. But give me 1 second. We're going to take a little quick stretch break, and we'll be right back. All right, I am back.
Bob, I'm sure you understand why that couldn't go through.
That's funny.
I saw that message.
Just catching up on chat. All right, are we ready to jump into topic number 3? Because I do have to stop at 2:30. Awesome. Okay, cool. Welcome in, everyone, and thanks for being here. If you guys enjoy today's live show, we're talking about, is Final Fantasy 14 for casuals? This is also going to be a highlight over on Work to Game. So if you guys are watching that, you are awesome. We love you so much. And if you hit that like button because you feel like it earns it, it does help us out greatly. To kick it off, Chris is about to go on a little break. So if you're seeing this as a highlight and you don't see anything else from us for at least a week or something, note that he's going to be on a nice little vacation with his wife as they celebrate 10 years of marriage. So congratulations to Chris on that achievement unlocked. But Chris, if there's anything you want to kind of jump in on? Otherwise, I feel let's just jump into the post, because there's a lot that we can talk about here.
No, I'm trying to finish up Heaven's Word this week, so let's get to it.
All right.
All right. How is Final Fantasy 14 for casuals? Cheers, everybody. Pretty much the title. I'm curious about the game, and I won't be able to invest time in it like I once used to when WoW was still pretty fresh. How's the content for casuals? there any point in playing when you can't grind your butt off or can't dedicate several evenings a week for PvE or whatever else there is available? Any input's much appreciated.
So, Chris, how is Final Fantasy 14 for casuals?
So, at the start of stream yesterday, I got asked, and they later did come back and say, like, hey, I didn't mean that for that to sound maybe as condescending as text put it, but, you know, I'm just now finding out that Chris was this longtime story skipper. And my understanding is you and Brian don't really do Savage and Extreme. So what were you doing, Chris? Like, why are, like, if you don't like the story in Final Fantasy 14 and you don't do Savage, why are you here? Because here? I've been around since ARR. And the answer is yes, it's an incredible game for casuals. Actually, so is World of Warcraft. If they want to return to WoW, but it does mean you're going to operate outside the meta for World of Warcraft. And so when people say, you know, maximum item level right now is like 300 or something like that, and my character's at like 190, 185, something like that. And because the moment I try to chase 300 at all, it's going to open up all this crap that I'm going to feel like I have to do. And so I just instead disengage from it entirely. If the gear does not literally fall onto my character, I do not want it. It needs to like equip itself. I don't want anything to do with that. And I found plenty to do in that game. Within Final Fantasy, this is an incredible game for casuals. So, Brian, what jumps out to you? Like if you had a friend come and say this, you know, hey, I used to play 11 pretty heavily, and I'm thinking about getting back into MMOs. Is 14 going to be something I can get by with less time?
Well, yes, but I would also, especially if they're coming from 11, there is a frustration that if that's what you're kind of wanting, you're not going to get that 1-to-1. You're as like it makes it 14 translates way better off of World of Warcraft than it does 11. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a timing thing. In 11, you can go run with trusts, like outside of its age and clearly being shown and its systems that, you know, if they reworked 11. I think there would be a community there, but obviously I don't think Sandbox is as popular as 14 as a theme park in that regards. I stand by my future prediction that the future MMO will be the Sand Park blending of theme parks and sandboxes together, because I think essentially that's where these games can end up really thriving. But you got to have that curated experience that the theme park offers, that thing to chase, right? That the next thing to go after. But in terms of the casual aspect, it's like the thing I would tell that player is like, if you want to play like a Final Fantasy story, like this is going to be a really great game for you. And generally speaking, that casual player plays the expansion story, goes on a nice break, having finished that story, and then returns in the next pre-expansion hype, gets caught up. Because when people ask me, like, you know, I got asked this last night. Am I still playing 14? Yeah, like my machinist is almost to cap. After that, I've got a bard, and that will Omni 90. But am I actively like playing 14 every day? Well, no, because I know that I'm in that spot where I run the risk of massive burnout. So where do I put my time and investment? In 0.4. After 0.4, then I feel my investment makes more sense, because that's when the gear cap does its thing. And that's where I really will invest my time. And that's just how I've done it. That's how I did it after learning that's how it worked in Heaven's Word, because it did. I grinded everything in ARR, every step increase. I was there, top tier, like always working hard on it. And then Heaven's Word came out, and I was like, wait a minute, this is the same process. So once that you understand the process, and you know that, and I think we'll talk about that more in a second, but then I say I invest in 0.4. You can also invest in 0.5. And that's generally what we see. So from a casual perspective, like if you really want a story, you want to run some dungeons, if you want to dabble in the raids themselves, you can absolutely do so. You don't have to commit an absorbent amount of time. And a lot of my time, because like to bring it, you know, back to that question asked of me, like, am I still playing? It's like a lot of my investments already been made. Like I have plenty of gil, I have houses, I have everything at cap, I have all these things done. Like 14 can ask a lot of your time, but it asks it in an optional way. It doesn't require it. And I think that helps it ease that burden for the casual player. Now, also at the same time, we got into discussion last night about the mid core of the game itself. I think the game has, you have ultimates and savage. You could maybe count extremes. Extremes can kind of blend that line, but we talk about the mid core. And Chris actually brought up that, like if you think of like Eureka and Bosia, like those are really excellent mid-core pieces of content. I absolutely agree with his point on that. But essentially then I say Final Fantasy 14 is excellent for the casuals. I think it's excellent and it doesn't need to change. And actually it is changing, making it even easier so that if you're kind of not wanting to step in with other players, that it works well. Its weakness in that area is it doesn't allow for hybrid groups. So if you and your friend are playing together, 14 struggles in that capacity because it has the casual solo player. And if you have a team of three other friends, you're going to be just fine. But it's in that, like, me and my buddy are trying to play this game. Me and my daughter are trying to play this game that 14 is currently lacking for the casual market. So yes, it's for casuals. It's getting better. I hope that it still improves in that area, but that's my answer. What do you think?
I mean, I think Deep Dungeon is the answer to that. In January, we'll get our third Deep Dungeon. Deep Dungeon you can do with 2s. Do whatever size you want, really. So up to 4. I think that this game is phenomenal for people that want to get exactly what they want out of it and then leave. Because one of the things that Final Fantasy 14 does is the updates are incredibly regular, incredibly predictable. So you know exactly when and what will be in every patch and when it will be here. And the surprises are there in like the specifics and all that. And we get really hyped on it as a community. But if you know there's a particular piece of content that's your thing, you kind of know whether or not a patch cycle is going to have it in it. And the patch cycles are 4 months long exactly. And so you can say, okay, well, cool, I got 4 months. And so then I'm going to go bail and do this. You also know how far behind you are. So like, how much do I have to close up? You know how many patches there are and typically how much story is per patch. Nothing's really tied to anything else. Current WoW has gotten to the point where a lot of systems have become integrated because that's what people asked for. The original request was, wouldn't it be cool if I got progress towards thing A while I was doing B? And that sounds really good until they're linked to each other. And now you realize, oh, wait, I only like A or B. And now I have to do both. Mm-hmm. And so you end up spending part of your time in content that you didn't intend to have to do. So for the player that likes every single aspect of WoW, current expansion probably feels relatively fine. Give or take some balance and some execution choices. But the moment there is one piece of content you don't like, if it's linked, you're still doing it. And Final Fantasy doesn't really do that. On the other hand, the downsides of WoW, since Brian kind of mentioned what he kind of thought the hard part on selling somebody that's, wondering, is 14 good for casuals, is this game has an enormous requirement compared to games like World of Warcraft or Destiny, or maybe not Destiny as much, or like Guild Wars, where the narrative element is something you could largely ignore if you wanted to. Mm-hmm. The narrative element is the driving force behind this game. They design it first, and then the content falls behind it. As somebody that the narrative is not why I play MMORPGs, I played this game for many, many years, utterly ignoring it, but that doesn't mean I wasn't doing it. So when I say I was a story skipper, I played the game back before they even sold story skips. So what I meant was I was using my escape key. And that means you still have to do it. And so if there is a quest that says, hey, I want to talk to you for a bit, escape, cool, can you go over there and talk to Brian? And then you go over there and Brian goes, hey. Skip. Cool, can you go back and talk to Chris? And then you come back over, hey, skip. All that effectively turned into was a walking simulator, and not in a good way. The handful of those that have been done well over the years. It's not. And so like the story is really lackluster and can't be done with friends if you're not engaged in the story. A lot of people do find the story very, very rewarding. I encourage people to give it a shot. But if it's not your thing as a casual, you can still find great things here. You're going to end up either buying a story skip or pushing the escape key, which is going to separate you from a portion of the community, and ends up being something that like all content's locked behind. So because that's manual, it depends on how casual somebody's talking about being. If they say, oh no, I'd want to give the story a shot, I play games 2 hours a week. Okay, well then you're going to be playing this for like 6 billion years to catch up, because we've got 600 hours of story to get to current. And so you're saying, I want to start an anime that has 1,000 episodes, and I was thinking about watching half an episode every day at lunch. You're just never going to get there. And so I do want to kind of warn people, and you just have to decide where that's worth. For some people, they flush $15 down the toilet every day.
Right, they do.
Some people have very strict budgets on what they spend on entertainment, in which case paying a subscription and not getting your value kind of stings.
Like, not to derail this topic, because this actually needs to be something you and I sit down and discuss at length, in its own topic in the future. But it's one of the things where it's like, I would love to see 14 also offer an additional payment method in which that instead of just being sub $15 a month, unlimited access, or you can buy 250 hours of gameplay for X, and then you use the hours. And that system already exists in 14. It exists in the world, but like, obviously, I think Square Enix likes that guaranteed $15 every month. But I think essentially, as we look at what is the future of subscription-based MMOs hold, I think that would actually, like, that value. Imagine buying a bundle of, like, you want to play and you want to play 2 hours a week. Like, the subscription model doesn't work for you in this game, like, and beyond that. But imagine, like, oh yeah, I can definitely clear this game in 200 hours. Let me just buy that as a bundle, and as I play it, when I have time, because I know a lot of people in the military, a lot of people with like different, they're in different life, hey, like I don't have internet 6 months out of the year, and I can't tell you why. Okay. It's like, yeah, I get it, but it'd be interesting. But I would love to go and play and do this whenever I have the opportunity. So I think there's options there. But to your point though, like on that, like, yeah, I would say that 14 isn't, based off its business model, the game for you outside the free trial. I was like, free trial, stick with it.
Massive.
And it's weird because it's like, never hand Square Enix money. Like, that's the answer. Like, I hear so many people that are like, I love this game, I'm gonna go ahead and get it. And I'm like, how far are you into it? Like, I'm level 30. I was like, it sounds weird, but don't give Square Enix the money. Get to Heavensward and you'll really, really be happy. But a lot of people are like, oh wait, now I'm locked into a sub. Anyway, on that note, like, I do want to like kind of talk about kind of the mid-core itself, because like, I see a lot of people debating in chat, like, what is mid-core? And to describe like what I think, because 14 has the mid-core piece of content that might vary based off your life experience. But the thing that I tell you, that if Yoshi P came out on stage, I would cry if he made this announcement. But if you look at the content in like Eureka Bosha, that kind of mindset, and they're like, hey, we're breaking that off the instant servers, we're bringing it into just the core game, and we're going to let that kind of play out in the open world for you guys who want to do it. And guess what? We're going to make a rotating zone, kind of the zone that y'all want to be playing in every week. And it's just going to be a little bit different. And there's going to be cool rewards tied into it. Like, that would be such a beautiful piece of mid-core that takes advantage of the whole game. That really integrates the whole game itself. And that's where it's like, one of the things I've also talked about is the idea that, imagine if you brought in the grand companies in a unique way, that you're not fighting each other, but the more that you do in zone Y, like, we're going to let you fly your banners for the Twin Adder in this zone for the next week or something like that, like, as a way of just kind of like, all right, like, taking advantage of the systems and the core gameplay loop, while at the same time not making it about rating, and at the same time not making it about story, but just making it about like, yeah, hey guys, let's all just go hang out in the Ruby Sea for a while. No reason, and then it's like, oh yeah, guys, like it's like you could end up basically kind of using in-game systems to make your own fun, and that scales to you as a player in difficulty. But that's just kind of where I end up falling, where it's like, I think there's definitely some more room for improvement that the game could make, that's beyond story and beyond rating. And that's what I kind of start to look at. How do we define and improve that mid-core? Chris.
So you asked the question, what is mid-core? And then you gave some examples, but to kind of define it.
Yeah.
It's, in my mind, it's the half step between hardcore and casual. So something that I can just engage in and just go hang out somewhere. Island Sanctuary, Golden Saucer, just kind of like a large portion of just like leveling alts, all of that, the act of getting through story, that can all be done very casually. It takes a lot of time, but it can be done very casually. And actually, in my mind, large portions of relics, especially once relics become old, become very, very casual. If you want to start working on your Heavensward relic now, and you're willing to just kind of chip away at it and do a little poetic grinding through like an MSQ roulette a day or something like that, it's very, very, very casual. Just get there at your own pace. You're not holding anybody else back. And hardcore content is where you need to step up or get out of the way. And that is content where you have to perform at a certain skill level or not do it. And so you start to get into this typically 8-man content that is very challenging and meant to be challenging. And we have different difficulties ranging from extreme up to savage to ultimate. But ultimately, like, if you're just just showing up like, yeah, I didn't really watch any guides. I haven't played in 2 months. I don't know my rotation. I don't even know if I have good gear. You don't belong there. It's going to begin asking things of you. And it's somebody who says, okay, I want to know more about this game. I want to get better at this game. And so that's what I would kind of group into hardcore. But within those, there's different levels, right? There's people who are just playing the game. Oh, I just kind of watch the cutscenes and like it. And there's people who are nerding out about this, but casually, but they're like having deep conversations about Aetherites over on like Eorzean Archives or something. Versus hardcore, there's people who are trying to get world first and be literal perfect parses, as opposed to, yeah, I'm clearing Savage, but like I'm clearing it at the pace that I'm clearing it, and I'll get through it when I get through it. And so I think within both those, there are striations. But what struggles is that there is a gap, and that gap can feel like, just one of those little relief lines in the sidewalk that stops the cracks from spreading from one side to another, or it can feel like this huge canyon. But what ends up happening is you finish with your time on one side at whatever level within hardcore, whatever level within casual you are, and you realize, I want to spend some time on the other side. And the jump to the other side feels totally foreign. If a Savage Raider decides today, I've skipped story the whole way through, all the way to Endwalker, and I hear it's good, I'd like to go back and get started in the lore, it is a ton to get into. Hey, what is all this golden saucer stuff? It is a ton to realize, oh my God, I haven't even been playing this game. This is like a totally different game. And same with the other way around. I need to have done all my beast tribes. I've done all my relics. I'm having a blast in the game. I've been playing casually. I'd like to try Savage. Is P5S really that hard? Compared to what you've been doing, yes, it's a monstrous step up. I'm not saying you can't make it, but you've got a lot to learn very rapidly to make the jump. And where the game struggles is that transition. The things that help encourage a casual player to grow and mature at their own pace while holding them accountable. So things like Bosja Zadnor's Delibram Regine feel like that, where they were punishing you. You die, but you still get your clear. But you die. And so like tying things to where you can feel yourself improving, you can feel yourself learning, and you're taking steps so that day you do decide to do Savage, if you ever get there, you don't have to, it doesn't feel so scary. Or I think class quests are something that kind of works backwards from the other way. As Savage players, what encourages me to go give Island Sanctuary a shot? What kind of baits me in and says, hey, there's kind of a challenging component to this. Could you go master that? And so midcore tends to be where it struggles. I think things like deep dungeons are great examples of midcore content where you can take them casually. You could go get your Necromancer Reaper, whatever title it's called. That's insane. And it just functions. And
right.
So
and it scales. And that's one of the things that I've brought up numerous times, especially in that regards, when you start looking at these stair steps, and it's like, how can they create content that helps continue to kind of push against the player? We talked about this obviously with like education ends up helping, but what ends up happening, and we saw this happen in Stormblood quite dramatically, where the game was, you're like, everybody's just like, man, they're cruising along, and then all of a sudden they hit, the final boss of that, and then it's like really difficult, especially for a while. It's like all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, like I thought it was good, and then it turns out like the game wasn't telling me anything. I wasn't getting feedback in anything that was there. Deep Dungeon's a great example of midcore. That's why, like when Chris on the stream yesterday brought up Bosja and Zadnor, I was like, yeah, that's it. But what I look at, and then what I dream of is like integration in terms of the whole capacity of the game. And we're seeing Yoshi P do these things. We're seeing them with the trust system being brought into the core of the game. Like, that's why I have hope for the future. We were talking about this last night. Like, there's a couple things that, like, for me personally, I think that depending on if the Criterion dungeons just absolutely hook me, awesome. I'm going to be excited. I don't have the expectation that will happen. And I have been talking, just like, it could be beneficial for me, having covered this game for 13 years, to go ahead and just take a break, to sit down and say, like, yeah, I've got everything to 90. Yeah, I've done the stuff that I've wanted to do. I've made the guides. Let me just take a couple patches off and literally come back and be excited again, rather than like, okay, yeah, I did the raids. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. This is the cycle, etc. So there could be some health, and that's what we always encourage people to do in their regards. But if Criterion's exciting and I can't pull myself away from it, I'm not going to. It's
Crystalline Conflict.
Yeah. Crystalline Conflict is amazing. It's amazing. Yeah.
You can do it casually. You can take it incredibly hardcore, and it scales to where you want to be. And we have a casual version of the new dungeon system, right? That kind of story, choose your own. And we have a savage version, which is meant to push you into the ground.
Yeah.
But that criterion, that middle step, that is your literal midcore.
Yeah. And the question then is like, what I don't know if it's going to do this. We don't know the full details, but the hope would be is that you have a system that like, oh, you run it and then it actually gets stronger against you. So you end up finding that perfect balance. One of the reasons why I do not define our current dungeons as what I would call midcore. I don't define them as midcore. You play through them a couple of times and then there's no, like, it does not scale to you. It literally becomes like that chore, which I was like, that's unfortunate. But Yoshi P talked about how with Criterion, you can bring in more player choice. It sets the expectation that you could go a couple different ways. Even with the variant version, you can still attack it from one, like you could choose 1 to 2, 1 to 4. You can change your job. Like a lot of these things are the personification of feedback that the player base has given them. Because like, I don't know if you've ever been like me, but I remember one time back in the day when it was really hard to get a tank before they made all the tank changes, whether you agree those changes were good or bad, that, you know, like that's a discussion for its own topic. But one of the things is like, gosh, I have a tank. We're sitting here waiting for like 10 minutes and hoping that one slots in. It would be so valuable if I was like, all right, guys, I just got the tank. Let's let it find us a DPS. You know, let's pull that in here overall. So like, I'm excited for that as a midcore. I'm excited. Like I am kind of like, I'm excited for Deep Dungeon in terms of that. I don't know if it's going to be something that it's like, man, you know, it really depends on the kind of system. So I am looking for reasons to be like hopeful for the cycle. I do think that 7.0 it should be, I think it's going to be fairly significant, you know, from a narrative perspective. But outside of that, like I see myself shifting more and more casual than I see myself shifting more and more hardcore in the game in its current state.
So Raul says, if you compare it to other games, nothing's hardcore. I think, you know, because of the amount of time, I think time on its own is not a real thing for me. Like if they just like Housing Savage was time, there's nothing hardcore about it. Like you just click the sign. And so like Relics, for example, I really struggle to label hardcore outside of things like Deliverum Savage, Baldesian Arsenal, things like that, because ultimately playing 1 hour a day and not playing well will still get you the relic. And so you do not have to be good at it. You can optimize anything, but you do not have to be good at it. And so I don't think time alone is a good measure. I think it's a factor, but it's not a good measure. Prog time, for example, is very different than total time because prog time is attentive time. How long does it take you to clear DSR? DSR is hardcore content. I also think that comparing in difficulty starts to be like, well, the hardest game is the only one that's hardcore, and anything less hard than that is not hardcore. And I disagree with that as well. The first time we have player true accountability that is turned on all the time, non-optional, I think you've entered hardcore because you are now entering a state that new players are not welcome and you are asking people to know the systems. And so, yes, there might be games out there that playing hardcore is easier than other games that you play, right? A Souls game, hardcore mode may mean something very different than hardcore Minecraft. But ultimately, you're saying before you step into this, you need to know this game. This is master mode. You need to take this very seriously compared to the entry point for new players. And so like, I think ultimates are absolutely hardcore. Now you can say our hardcore doesn't go high enough. We only allow people to get to the ceiling and there's still room to improve. And actually our hardcore community does that. They go and try to clear UCOB only using like half the arena. They go clear UCOB using only tanks. There are trackers for these things that people go do, and they make all sorts of weird challenges for themselves, minimum item level, all this stuff that allows them to extend the ceiling within the already hardcore community to go even higher. But that doesn't mean that a brand new player, well, you should be expected to do extreme because that's not even hardcore anymore. It's still a big ask. The jump from I'm going through dungeons, I don't really know if I'm doing my rotation, does gear matter, to clearing the, you know, EX4, there's a lot you're going to need to learn very, very rapidly that dungeons did not hold you accountable for. And so I think that very first jump to extreme, I think you've made a massive shift in the way you play this game when you clear your first extreme. That doesn't make you world first. Zeno called himself aggressive on a recent podcast. That doesn't make you an aggressive high-end player. But it does mean that's the category you're shifting towards, as opposed to Brian sitting down with his daughter and introducing her to Island Sanctuary.
Right. Absolutely. It's going to be interesting to see. Man mode. Yeah, I like that. I like that comment. That's why I highlighted it. Thanks, Jace, for sharing that. At the end of the day, like, I think it's gonna be interesting to see. 14 definitely has that, and that's a strength. It's a strength to be able to invite people in. I've often wondered, especially with these changes that they've been making, like, does this then help invite more people into kind of the more MMO side of it, the more, you know, hardcore content side of things? And I think Yoshi P, it's gonna be neat to see what Deep Dungeon looks like this round, because if they've learned anything from Boja and Zadnor, where it's like, hey, let's bring in lost actions, and all of a sudden that brings a level of flexibility and you know, and challenge to it, while we see people going and challenging the Deep Dungeon solo, you know, for that goal. Then you tie it in over here, and it's like, oh yeah, imagine that. And what I think would be really, you know, I don't think we'll see it because it's just the amount of work, but it's like, if it ends up being successful, like, I'd love to see those systems roll into the other Deep Dungeons as just a form of like synergy between the content, synergy between what is offering, rather than like being their own completely independent, you know, systems that, oh yeah, we want to do Heaven on High, but we're kind of, I don't want to be stuck at level, you know, 70, and I don't want to not have these abilities, and, you know, etc. You know, like, that's where it's like, I think it would be really cool to see. Chris, do you have any final thoughts on this subject?
No, I think it's interesting. I think we could have this exact same conversation, focusing only on the casual definitions. You know, is somebody that's gotten every single relic still casual just because it's approachable content? And we could sit there and talk about the disparity between the bottom of hardcore and the top of hardcore. So I don't have anything further to add here, but it really opens up a lot of future topics that we could talk for hours. But Brian's got places to be. I
got things to do. These conversations continue over on Twitch, guys. The link is pinned in the live chat over here with us on YouTube. Love it if you go hang out with Chris as he does some more 3.4, right?
3.4 today, 3.5 and 3.55 tomorrow. And then when I get back from vacation, we'll be jumping into like some missing class quests, maybe Alexander. I don't know what all we're going to do.
And you can absolutely, let's get a shout out for Chili over on Twitch as well, for Moogle Go Round Radio. He says, for myself, was like, Cole Evix also hanging out here on the YouTube side. So we've dropped his link as well. So please be sure to do that and go follow these.
Cole the other day.
What's up?
I reacted to Cole, and I'm going to clip it together with some other reactions.
Oh, excellent. Excellent.
I like his stuff.
Oh yeah, dude. Cole does a great job. On that note, guys, that is the show for today, the live show. We will be back sometime here in, 10-ish days. I'm looking at the wrong buttons here. And there we go. All right, we'll be back here around 10-ish days ish. Thanks so much, guys, for being here. We love you, faces. We were so happy that you've joined us for today. Hopefully you enjoyed the show. Hopefully you enjoyed the audio version of the show if you're listening over there. And we will see you in the next video, live stream, live show, Twitch, everywhere we make content. Ba-bam.
I think that kicks it down to basically October. That wraps up September.
Is that September? Yeah, that does. October, which we should
Longest
be
getting. Break I've taken.
Which we should be getting new live letter. We should be getting some new stuff. We'll start learning of. We expect the date for the Criterion Dungeons to be dropping on the 18th of October. I think that seems reasonable itself. So,
cool.
Yeah, I'm glad you guys have been enjoying these shows. Thank you all for showing up to them. Whether you're on YouTube or Twitch, and thanks for the 77 likes. That jumped up. Like, I looked over the likes and it was like 35, and now I'm looking at it 77. So thank you guys for that. If you guys are going to go hang out with Chris as well, I'm going to go ahead and hit end broadcast on YouTube and wave it out. So we will see you guys in the next one, but hopefully we'll see you over on Twitch as well. Peace.